So this is a news item, and it is not dated, but it's dated the 21st of November 2020. It's such a refreshing headline. Wish this headline could be about the East End of London, either about the mayor of Hackney, mayor of Tower Hamlets, or the mayor of Newham, or the mayor of Lewisham resigns. But it says, quote, soul destroying. It's obviously an item posted on a paper that is based in New Zealand, Bay of Plenty. It's the Bay of Plenty Times, and it says, mayor resigns. Minister considering commissioners after Tenby Powell quits. And Tenby Powell says, it has been a privilege to serve you all and the city. Kia ora. Thank you, time is up. Now, this one, it has been soul-destroying. That was Tenby Powell's stark assessment of the infighting that plagued his mayoralty prior to announcing his shock resignation yesterday. He made the announcement at the end of a meeting in which the council voted 5-5, Powell's casting vote tipping the balance to bring in a crown manager to address the ongoing conflict between some elected members, that is, elected councillors. Late yesterday, however, the Minister of Local Government, Nanaya Mahuta, confirmed she was also considering higher level interventions, including replacing them with commissioners. That was the outcome Powell called for in his resignation speech in the meeting, speaking over booming claps from his longtime rival councillor John Robson. Tauranga's future as a city of strategic importance to New Zealand cannot be left to a small group of petty politicians who have a long track record of hindering, or even worse, stopping progress, Powell said. I hope history will show that November 2020, the DNA of incompetence among TCC elected members was recognized and cauterized, and after a period of crown management, a governance team can be rebuilt with real leaders. Mahuta said she was informing Cabinet of her intention to look at crown intervention options at Tauranga City Council. Now, this is not, the language, obviously in English, the language is the phrasing, governance and infighting and plaguing and all that. These are typical kind of phrases and words and slogans and terms used about the mayor system. And the current campaign ongoing in Tower Hamlets and in Newham, these are campaigns in kind of formality, but the substance remains to be seen. To what extent these campaigns have substance behind them about the referendum. Now, the campaign is for referendum to be held in each of these councils over the future kind of composition of the council, whether through the mayor system or the council system. mayor system or the council system, meaning that the council of elected councillors becoming the maker of decisions, obviously the political decisions, the financial decisions. And as we have been saying, the campaign against elected mayor, the first time that there was a referendum in 2010, the campaign was sabotaged. We only found out afterwards, but we had suspected that a sabotage was ongoing. The campaign for a no answer to the mayor system was sabotaged by people in the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets who said that they were against the mayor system. But it turned out that a number, especially the person who had been kind of appearing as the leader of the campaign, turned out to have lied or misled the electors. And that is the reason why the no side of the election or the referendum got just under 40% of the votes. And the yes side got just over 60%. And the disaster that the mayor system is was about to be foisted on Tower Hamlets. And the disaster continues for now more than 10 years because the result of the referendum being yes, there was a mayoral election during the second half of October 2010. And the elected mayor meant that the elected councillors on Tower Hamlets Council were immediately silenced and had no say. Not only that, it was made worse by them, the councillors supporting the so-called elected mayor chose to stay silent. And at that time, the opposition on the council was the Labour Party councillors who did make comments against the elected mayor, Lutfur Rahman, but they had nowhere near the substance or the rigor or the consistency or the determination to condemn the anti-democratic behavior of the council under a mayor system or system. And that has gone on for more than 10 years now, because although Lutfur Rahman was ousted by the election commissioner who looked at the petition, considered the petition against the election of 22nd of May 2014 and declared that Lutfur Rahman had got in again by corrupt means, using corrupt means. And the commissioner also kind of disqualified and declared as void the election of councillor Alibor Chaudhry, who was very close to Lutfur Rahman when Lutfur Rahman was in post himself. But the council itself, the election of the other councillors at the 22nd of May 2014 was not collectively or separately, except, as I said, the Alibor Chaudhry behavior. But the Alibor Chaudhry was not ousted because of election. He was ousted because of his behavior and conduct that closely kind of aided and abetted the behavior and conduct of Lutfur Rahman, which was stated by the election commissioner, Richard Morey, as having been corrupt. So the retention of their posts as councillors by those others who had been, quote, elected as councillors on the 22nd of May 2014 continued. This continued until the election 4 years later in May 2018. And in that 4-year period, overall, Tower Hamlets Council lost democracy, accountability, transparency, and a lot more. And now, although Tower Hamlets Council being numerically overwhelmingly controlled by the Labour Party members, it is not necessarily the case that their vote on the 18th of November to hold a referendum in May 2021 would necessarily be followed by the Labour Party itself campaigning against the mayor system, because the incumbent holder of that corrupt post, John Biggs, carrying the Labour Party card, has said that he would support the continuation of the mayor system. He would, wouldn't he? And opposite to that, the no side in the Labour Party is not vocal. And there was no evidence that one single member of the Labour Party, one single councillor that is, of the Labour Party on Tower Hamlets Council has made any statement showing their total kind of commitment for democracy and against the anti-democratic and corrupt and corrupting post of elected mayor. And it seems that the supporters of the previous kind of incumbent mayor have been promoting the idea of elected mayor as a democratic thing. And they are now openly campaigning for the mayor system. And the petition against the election of Luthuraman, dated the 22nd of May 2014, petition against the election on that day, was heard between 2nd of February 2015 to 13th of March 2015. And the principal counsel for the parties, according to Richard Morey's ruling, for the petitioners was a man called Francis Hoare, H-O-A-R, not W-H-O-R-E. Francis Hoare. And the first respondent, that is Luthroman, was represented by a man called Duncan Penny. He's got a QC after his name. And the second respondent, that was John S. Williams, who was then kind of dropped as a respondent by the petitioners. But for the duration of his case being, or defense being represented, and it was represented by a man called Timothy Straker with a QC after his name. And I point out the QC after their names because Maury himself said, quote, "I trust both leading counsel, that is the barristers, will forgive me if I do not repeat QC on each occasion I mention them in the remainder of this judgment." So let's say the Maury ruling, we shall call it the judgment, as he is calling it. And then he talks about the law and all the rest of it. And according to this page, I mean, there are, in the report or in the judgment of Maury, there are, on 5 pages, the word corrupt appears. So let's say where the first occurrence takes place of corrupt, the relevant part of section S 113 reads, as Maury cites it, "A person shall be guilty of a corrupt practice if he is guilty of bribery. And 2, a person shall be guilty of bribery if he, directly or indirectly, by himself or by any other person on his behalf, and gives any money or procures any office to or for any voter or to or for any other person on behalf of any voter or to or for any other person." Corruptly does any such act, as mentioned above, on account of any voter having voted or refrained from voting, or makes any such gift or procurement, as mentioned above, to or for any person in order to induce that person to procure or endeavor to procure, or makes any such gift for procurement as mentioned above, to or for any person in order to induce that person to procure or endeavor to procure, or if upon or in consequence of any such gift or procurement as mentioned above, he, this candidate or the procures or engages, promises or endeavors to procure the, for the purposes of this section, references to giving money include references to giving, lending, agreeing to give, references to procuring any office, including reference to giving, procuring, etc., etc. So what Maury is saying in his judgment is kind of spelling out the relevant act of parliament in Britain that he relies on, or he was relying on in this kind of consideration and examination and hearing of the petition against Lutfur Rahman. And he gives the details of what makes a kind of corrupt kind of behavior. And he kind of deals with the argument by the barrister called Mr. Penny, who was dealing with the meaning of the term bribery under Section 113 of the 1983 Act. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4. And he then goes on to treating, and he talks about treating. Person shall be guilty of a corrupt practice if he is guilty of treating. A person shall be guilty of treating if he corruptly, by himself or by other persons, etc., any meat, drink, entertainment, or provision to or for any person, for the purpose of corruptly influencing that person or any other person to vote for, vote or refrain from voting, etc., etc. Bearing in mind the burden and standard of proof relating to corrupt practices, I could not be satisfied that the allegation of voters going into polling booths were capable of amounting to undue influence, and I do not propose to discuss the extent of that. So the two aspects of undue influence which do merit serious consideration of the law are spiritual influence and intimidation at polling stations. So this has got this ruling or the judgment by Mori quite elaborately refers to all these concepts. And he goes on to discuss the various steps that he took and were taken before the petition was tried, if you like. And we shall be coming to this point of corruption that Mori kind of attached to Lutfur Rahman before he ousted him as the mayor. So Mori sets out in detail the context and the general background and the general application of the law that he was applying. And that is where, when Lutfur Rahman made several kind of tactical attempts to have the Mori ruling kind of discredited through a court of law, Luther Roman failed because Mori actually went to some extra length to explain what he was doing and why he was doing it. And the details included various references, factual references, reference to the Act of Parliament, and the contextual kind of explanations. And he went to historic references to some other comparable cases of electoral fraud and corruption and so on. And Mori has referred to Tower Hamlets, where politicians secured the Muslim vote. That is the phrase that he has used. And we shall come to the role that Mori has played in consistently or persistently underplaying the concept of racism and racist behavior by the various persons in the Tower Hamlets Labour Party. And quite separately from anything to do with Lutfur Rahman's challenge to the Mori ruling, completely separately, and as part of our own Khoodeelaar campaign and the Bangilar campaign's opposition to the mayor system, and as part of the evidence of our movement defending the community in the East End of London, we can say that Richard Mori totally misrepresented the aspect about racism. Now, that is nothing to do with Lutfur Rahman, as I said. I think Mori would have done the same thing if he were considering a similar petition against another person who were a Muslim and who would have benefited from a truthful and objective assessment of racism in Tower Hamlets on the facts. Benefited doesn't mean that they would have kind of defeated the petitioner who included, or the petitioners who included racist elements among them. And quite apart from this particular ruling about the election of mayor at the 2014 mayor election, our campaign will be publishing extensive and absolutely overdue diagnosis of Richard Mori's judgment, as I said, in the particular context of his misrepresentation and misunderstanding and his bias about racism. Because Mori looked for any kind of small excuse that would let John Biggs be seen as not a racist. And Richard Mori completely misinterpreted the difference between Michael Keith's statement about John Biggs being a racist and what Mori calls the official manifesto or document of the Labour Party. Whether the document could be classed as official or whether it could be termed as a personal opinion makes no difference to the actual meaning of the word racist. So Richard Mori was himself showing his deep ignorance about racism and his absolutely total predetermined kind of bias in favor of the racists that were referred to during the proceedings. Nothing to do with the other things that Mori kind of came to, but that is the point that we are making, and we shall be making that point extensively in the separate document and diagnosis that we shall be publishing.